Hello there, my adorable little jelly beans. Welcome to another instalment of Self-Love September. We are moving on now to talking about working with archetypes for self-love. I know that a lot of people work with archetypes in various different guises and think about archetypes in various different ways that are useful on the journey of self-development. For me, focusing on archetypes, or more significantly, archetypal figures for my self-love journey has been so inspiring and so useful. I regularly utilize archetypes to draw out of me the skills, the capabilities and the energies that I feel that I do have deep down inside me somewhere, but I'm kind of struggling to get hold of them and bring them out to the surface. So I feel like it's kind of self-loving to observe this mirror image of whatever it is inside of me that I'm trying to really access or I'm trying to get to grips with. And that's a lot of the reason that I work with various different images of historical figures, that I work with deities, that I work with all kinds of different stuff like that, rock stars and whatnot. I'm really interested in icons and rebels and mavericks and images that are iconic in nature, and people that did certain things that I can connect with or exuded certain energies that I want to get in touch with. And I found that's been really useful for my own self-love journey. In this particular video, I'm referencing the kinds of archetypes particularly that are individual figures that have different characteristics or different kind of paths on the hero's journey, if you will. And those figures can be labelled and understood by people as having access to certain characteristics or innately possessing certain qualities. And we see these archetypal figures in different guises in different eras and civilizations. So for example, let's say that we're looking at the archetypal figure of the hermit or the spiritual sage, if you will. You will notice that that particular archetypal figure shows up in various different stories from various eras and civilizations. You'll be able to think of at least 2 or 3 examples of the hermit archetype or the powerful sort of spiritual sage archetype, and you will notice how that archetype comes along in different masks, if you will, wearing different uniforms with different names, but ultimately it's that same archetype, it's that same type of figure. Tarot is chock full of archetypal figures, and that's one of the many reasons that I love it so much, and that's one of the reasons a lot of people, I think, love it so much. You've got mothers in there, fathers, you've got tricksters, you've got magicians, you've got adventurers, you've got heroes, you've got warriors, you've got fools, you've got all kinds of different archetypes, you know, and there's subcategories upon subcategories of archetypes in there for the taking. Any kind of character with any kind of collection of qualities that you would find in any book or any film or any group dynamic that you find yourself in life is portrayed in tarot. With any luck, you're going to find certain archetypal figures that represent characteristics within you that you appreciate in yourself. Now, for some people, it's not at that phase on the self-love journey. It's going to be impossible for some of you to be able to look at a particular archetype or an archetypal characteristic and see yourself in it. But for other people, it is more possible at this point where you are on the journey. When you work with an archetypal figure, you should be able to see that archetypal figure in a number of different ways. So you can see the main way that you connect with it, but then you can see clusters of associations around it, some of which are more, let's say, in light, and some of which are more in shadow, for want of better terms. So for example, I'll just give you an example for me. I really strongly connect with the Queen of Swords in tarot. For me, Queen of Swords is the queen that I connect to most strongly, and she's also the woman in tarot that I connect with most strongly. Now, to me, the Queen of Swords is representative of the archetype of the fierce, shrewd, independent woman. So that's one way of seeing her. But you could also see her as the cunning, cold Ice Queen. You could see her as the high-minded intellectual. You could see her as the diplomat or the ambassador. You could see her in a bunch of different ways. You could see her as the warrioress. You know, you could definitely see her as having that warrior energy. As an ENTP, I'm quite fond of seeing Queen of Swords as the debater. But I also acknowledge that the Queen of Swords could be seen as the cold-hearted Ice Queen, if you will, the cold, callous, frivolous, sharp-tongued bitch. I mean, there's loads of different ways you could see this archetype. There's clusters of information around the central spoke that you consider to be the essence of the archetype from your perspective. Now, to me, when I look at Queen of Swords, I think about things that I celebrate within myself, but I can also recognise the shadows in the Queen of Swords, which apply to me as well sometimes. And through seeing the Queen of Swords in its fullness, that archetype teaches me how to honour myself, how to celebrate myself, but also how to train myself and reassess my behavior and be honest with myself about what I'm doing wrong and what I'm doing badly and where I need to change. So my point is, you don't need to see a particular kind of archetypal figure as being all good in order to represent things that are good about you. You can definitely see an archetypal figure as playing a more nuanced role than that, where there are a number of different characteristics associated, but essentially you can see some of the good characteristics from yourself mirrored in that particular archetype. If you know anything about tarot at all, I would definitely urge you to think about which figures in tarot are representative of the most positive of your own characteristics. Which figures can you see yourself in and think, you know what, that isn't half bad about me, that's something that I enjoy about myself, that's something that's good about me that I can see mirrored in that archetype. It may be a figure in tarot that represents one of your key skills, one of your strengths, one of your perspectives on life. It might be a figure that represents the way that you've dealt with your issues in the past or the way that you choose to deal with them now. It might be a figure that represents the way that you treat other people and the compassion that you show to other people. It could go in any number of directions. And if you don't enjoy tarot, if you're not tarot savvy, just think about any of the fictional books that you've read, any of the movies that you've seen, anything where there's a narrative, there's a story, and you can recognize a particular character as being an archetype that represents the things that are good about you. When someone is really struggling to love themselves, it can be very difficult for them to acknowledge their great characteristics within themselves. But when they see those characteristics mirrored in something that is away from self, they can get that sense of consciousness in the detachment that comes with that. They can look at something that is removed from their own beingness, and they can utilize that figure as a mirror, and they can be like, wow, you know what, actually this figure, this storyline, this situation right now, this characteristic is a mirror of something wonderful inside of me. It's something that I would do. It's a way that I would deal with the situation. And that's a chance to congratulate yourself and celebrate yourself and honor who you actually are. When I first started working with my matron deity, Hel, the Norse goddess of the underworld, I started to recognize over time that there was so much about her that was exactly like me. And that was when I realized that she'd been sent to me for a very, very special set of reasons. And one of those reasons was to give me the opportunity to celebrate within myself that which I had significantly and consistently overlooked in myself for so long. There is so much about her that mirrors my own strength, and it really gave me an opportunity to connect with that through actually observing someone else, these external energies and characteristics that I didn't think had anything to do with me. I ultimately came to the point of loving those things within me, and that's really the essence and the beauty of working with archetypal figures, whether they're rock stars, whether they're historical figures, whether they are images of the figures in tarot, whether they are your favorite movie stars or comic book characters, not movie stars, but like, you know, movie roles or comic book characters, anything like that. The idea is that you set yourself apart from your own characteristics that you can bring into being, so that you bring them into being within you and you celebrate them, rather than convincing yourself that you're incapable of bringing those characteristics into being, or that you just do not possess them. My matron deity definitely has things in common with me, but on the other hand as well, there's a lot of things about her that were severely lacking in me when I first started working with her. I wanted to believe deep down that I had the ability to exude those characteristics, but I wasn't doing so at the time. So for instance, Hel is incredibly strong and independent and fearsome and forthright, and I recognized at the time when I first started working with her that I was all of those things myself, and she gave me an opportunity to celebrate them. But Hel is also incredibly disciplined, very rigorous, very organized, very structured in her work. Now, I was none of those things when I first started working with her. I hold my hands up, all right? I was not a Filofax person when I first started working with Hel. I didn't have a grand plan, so to speak. I was very, very scatty. And I really do believe that working with her as an archetypal force in my life was one of the key things that helped me to capture those characteristics inside of me. And I'm saying all of that to say to you this: if you know that there are characteristics inside of you somewhere deep down that you find really difficult to access, or you feel you are bereft of those qualities, it never hurts to work with archetypes that represent those things that you feel that you're lacking. And it's really working with those archetypes archetypes and working with their appearance or their stories or their energies that can bring you to the point of bringing those hidden characteristics out in yourself. It really is so powerful. The first woman that I see every single morning, aside from myself, on my altar when I sit down, I've got a mirror there, so I see myself straight away, and then there is an image of Joan of Arc right in the center of my altar. That is not a mistake. That is not an accident. It is not just incidental that I've chosen to observe Joan of Arc every morning when I wake up and sit down at my altar. There's a reason that I want to see that wondrous woman in full armour very first thing when I woke up. There is a reason that I want to look every morning at the portrait of the woman who said, "I'm not afraid, I was born to do this." That is very purposeful. That is something that I consciously decided I needed to see every day, because I, like everybody else, I feel weak, I feel lazy, I feel incapable. And so who better to look at than a wondrous, wondrous woman in armour? Having a level-headed understanding of something that you would like to improve upon within yourself gives you the best possible chance to actually get in closer proximity to it. This is a form of self-mastery. If you are down on yourself because you're lacking a particular characteristic or skill that you really want to have, if you're lacking in a particular quality and you feel that you're really holding yourself back because of that lack of that quality, select an archetype that speaks to that quality that you want to build up within yourself and utilize that archetypal figure as a form of inspiration, as a parent for you on the journey. So you always have someone to look at to recognize the essence of that same quality within you and inspire you to bring it to the surface. It's not just about consciously selecting the archetypes that you want to work with, although that is amazing and I would definitely recommend that you do that. But I think a big part of working with archetypes on the self-love journey is also just recognizing which ones come to you over and over and over again. Which ones seem to be visiting you, and what do you think that means? There are certain archetypes that come to you at specific times in your life for reasons unbeknownst to you, and it's really important that you pay attention to when those archetypes are visiting you and think about what that might mean. Some archetypes visit you over and over and over again on the path of life, and they have a very strong message for you, and if you can bring yourself to listen to that message without being afraid and without downplaying the potential significance of it, you really can give yourself something very self-loving. It's a gift to yourself to be able to do that, to acknowledge the archetypal appearances that keep taking place and really give them your time and your focus. At a certain point on my journey, I noticed a very, very significant amount of visitations of what I would call the trickster archetype or the trickster energy. It was just in things I was reading, it was coming up in my dreams and my daydreams, it was coming up in conversations I was having, it was coming up in my readings, and I really decided, like, you know what, okay, hold the phone, what the fuck is this trickster archetype thing about? And I started to delve into it and explore it and work with it, and it gave me an incredible amount of power and fortitude when I needed it most, and it helped me get back in touch with my sense of humour, and it helped me to be happy again and have fun again during a really crap time in my life. So sometimes archetypes just come to visit. You will notice from the things that you go through, the stories that you're being told by friends or family, the various different scenarios that come up, the movies you're watching, the books you're reading, different things you see in the street or conversations that you overhear. Sometimes there's an archetype in there, and sometimes, yeah, that archetype does come to you as a deity, and that's a big blessing. You know, if you work with deity, if you're open to that kind of thing, that can very much happen. But for a lot of people, it's just focusing on fictional characters or historical figures or, you know, whoever, just figures that remind you of those set characteristics that seem to be coming up for you over and over again. And it's being guided by the voice of the cosmos telling you that these particular archetypes are important and that you are being urged, cosmically urged, to explore them. The themes that come up in your life and the things that you go through will sometimes guide you towards a particular kind of archetypal figure. Like if you are butt fuck crazy head over heels in love for the first time and everything is love and everything is romance, you might want to start looking into love goddesses or the lovers as an archetype and watching movies and reading books that are about great love stories and great romances and classic iconic couples. Watch True Romance, you know, that kind of shit. So it's just like you want to lend yourself to those archetypes that are really kind of fizzy in your life and significant in your life, and that helps you to lean into yourself more and deepen your understanding of yourself so much more. You can invoke archetypes to help you with your challenges in life. You can really just kind of envision yourself as the warrior You can envision yourself as the magician. You can envision yourself as the field marshal. You know, whatever archetype it is, whatever role you feel like you need to play to get you through that job interview, to get you through that exam, to help you to open your mouth and speak the words that you haven't spoken for months and months, that you've been putting off speaking because you're scared. You can really look at an archetypal role of some kind and you can slip into that role, and you don't need to use particular figures or characters or deities to do that, although it can really help if you do. But really you can just connect with what it means for you to be a lover, a father, a mother, a friend, a trickster, a whatever, an adventurer, a rebel, a maverick, a revolutionary. Like, all of these things are archetypal roles, and we can see those roles played out in many stories, in many eras, in many civilizations, in many faiths, in many myths. But we also can just think about what those words mean to us. What really underpins those words for us? What are the associations that we have with each of them? What is the light and the shadow and the spectrum between of each or any of them? And whenever you need an archetype, whenever you need to really fuse with an archetypal energy, it's there for you. Don't tell yourself that it's not there for you, because it very much is. Archetypes are your tools. Archetypes are within you, and you can call them to the fore when you are in need of them. Give some thought to the very first archetypal figures, the very first kind of roles that were played in stories or movies or myths or whatever that you were really interested in as a child. What kinds of things really fascinated you? What kinds of things made you feel really potent and super powerful? When I was a very young girl, I had an encounter with a goddess of death and destruction, and that set me on a path to being very interested in the divine feminine principle as it relates to death and destruction. And that was something that I realized from very early on was a source of immense power for me, and was also a source of immense self-contact for me. It's something that helps me to come home to myself, to who I am and to what I can do. And it's going to be different for every single person. I know that there are so many characters that I loved and so related to when I was little that really fuel my desire to do better and be better now. When I was a kid, I was obsessed with Robin Hood. I watched the Disney movie Robin Hood over and over again. It's one of the more little known ones, but I was really interested in Robin Hood. I went to Sherwood Forest as a kid. I was really interested in all the different adaptations, and I made my dad tell me the story a million times because I just loved that idea that he lived in the woods and he gathered a band and a community around him, and he robbed from the rich and gave to the poor, and he was really about just kind of leveling the playing field. I loved that, and that's another thing that I can look back on now and say, okay, there were early roots of strength and connection for me with that particular archetype of the insurrectionist and the man of the people, you know, that all that kind of jazz. So it's really about thinking, okay, when I was young, what were the archetypes that really stole my heart? What were the archetypes that made me feel hopeful and good about life? What even were the archetypes that made me feel excited about getting older and actually being an adult and actually making my way in the world? Sometimes when we're lost and we're making unself-loving choices, it's really useful to think about some of the earliest archetypes that really made us feel the best that we could feel about ourselves and made us feel excited about growing up so we could be that really good version of ourselves. The whole point of talking about archetypes is not to in any way insinuate that you don't have these kinds of characteristics or you can't be that kind of person. It's quite the opposite. It's to remind you that you do have those characteristics, but sometimes you just need a little bit of inspiration to get yourself there. One of the most important things that I've learned from working with the Blessed Mother, the Blessed Virgin Mary over time, is that you should never surrender your power to any archetypal force that you're working with. I used to definitely do that when I first started reconnecting with the Blessed Mother. I definitely let myself go off on this big tangent of like, I'm never going to be good enough and I'm never going to be like this and I'm never going to be in the seat of my compassion to the extent that I need to be, and I'm always going to have a ruthless streak and I'm always going to be cold in some way, and I'm never going to be able to really connect with the deep power of my own love. And it was like I was kind of using her image and her story and her energy to push myself out, to lock myself out of what it was that I was trying to obtain. And she was just very spiritual throwdown with me. She was like, I don't want you to look at me and not see yourself. I want you to look at me and know that you are me. And it has to be like that. You have to look at these archetypal forces and energies as ways to reconnect with who you are in your soul. Don't lock yourself out of the experience of any of the the characteristics of that archetype. The point is to recognize that you do have access to those characteristics of that archetype, and the archetype itself is just the inspiration for you to find the place in your heart where that energy exists for you, and you can bring it forth into the world. So it's like an ally, it's like a parent, it's like an energy that calls you to be the best version of yourself. It's a reminder of something that you do very much have within you. It's a reminder of something that you absolutely can bring to the surface and you can utilize it, but sometimes it's just getting that reminder to allow yourself to get there. You may want to think about designing some words or some gestures or a combination of both things in order to invoke any archetypal figures that you require, that you want to work with, whether it's fictional characters, whether it's just the raw archetype and the word and what it means to you, whether it's deities, whether it's, you know, figures from movies or comic books, anything like that. If you feel like you want to really strongly invoke the energy and the potential and the ability of a particular archetypal force, don't forget that you can create a key that can instantly allow you to unlock and access those archetypal energies. Yes, I am talking about magic with a K. That is what this kind of thing very much is. If you know that you want that warrior energy and you want to be like Katniss Everdeen and you want to bring the Katniss Everdeen vibe to this point in the day where you're really going to need to be able to do that, figure out some words of power or a gesture or something that you do, some sort of like testicle, spectacles, wallet and watch, abracadabra, open sesame type vibe, that will allow you to bring forth your inner Katniss Everdeen and lock into that energy. It's all about finding the lock so that you are strapped into that fucking energy until you decide that it's time not to be anymore. So you can really invoke it, you can really bring it forth to you, and a lot of people do that by having something in their reflection space or on their altar or in their journal or in their planner or on their lock screen on their phone, so that they can see that thing all the time. Just like me with Joan of Arc. I've literally got Joan of Arc right in the middle of my altar, right there, and I look at her often when I'm meditating, and I see her throughout the day, and it really helps me to lock into that energy that I need to be able to face my challenges. And it's similar with the other images of deities and different figures and all that kind of thing that I have around my home. I have a portrait of Frida Kahlo in my living room. I have a portrait of Hel, the goddess of the underworld. I have statuettes and portraits of the Blessed Mother. I've got the High Priestess right here in my tarot corner where I do all of my readings, where I rely heavily on my spiritual wisdom and intuition, and that's exactly why she's there. So, you know, it's really thinking about what kinds of images you want to be able to help you to lock in on even the most organic basis, and thinking about where you can put those images and those figures so that they act as reminders to you that you can lock into that amazing energy anytime that you like. I really hope these ideas about working with archetypes for your self-love journey have been useful, baby cakes. I have loved talking about this topic. It's so interesting and it really just lights me up to be able to talk about it. So I hope I've helped those of you who might need to understand a little bit more about what your process could be with combining archetypes with the self-love journey. Please let me know down below if there are any archetypes that you work with, whether you work with them in the form of deities, historical figures, you know, figures from movies or books, whatever the case may be, or whether you just think about them as the raw, kind of just the name, the image and the associations that come through for you. Have you found that there have been any big changes with the kinds of archetypes that really inspire you? Are you finding that new archetypes are coming into your midst that inspire you? I would really love to know what your thoughts and experiences have been. This is a topic I could talk about forever, but I won't. I'll let you go now. So much love and self-love until the next installment, baby cakes. Blessed be.